Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. So we are here for BC and Yukon book prizes this evening, and it is the 2022 season finale of Incite, which has been presented in partnership between the Vancouver Public Library, Vancouver Writers Fest, and TELUS. My name is Leah. I'm a member of the programming and learning team here at the library, and we're currently gathered on the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. My ancestors came here to so-called Canada from Europe in the 1800s under the promise of what was called free land. And they viewed it as this vast empty space that was just available for their taking, and that could not have been more incorrect. And that erasure of Indigenous livelihoods is just one piece of the ongoing legacy of colonialism. And it continues to this day, and it grants me a privilege that I did not earn. And for me, that privilege comes along with the responsibility to make sure that I am centering and honoring Indigenous voices as settlers move towards being in right relationship with Indigenous communities. The ongoing work of decolonization is something that I'm dedicated to incorporating into my life as a public servant, and I hope that you're also out there finding ways to center and honor and uphold Indigenous voices in your communities on the lands that you call home. This is our final Incite for the year, and I just really wanted to take a moment to appreciate our folks at the Vancouver Writers Fest for all of their hard work this year. So they have brought an excellent roundup of authors this season to our VPL stage, both virtually and in person. And I do want to say hello to folks who are joining on the live stream right now from home. Thank you for joining us. And I've learned so much personally. I've been working with these folks for about 2 years, and I've learned so much from all of the diverse author voices that have brought to our stage. So very grateful for you folks, and looking forward to doing it all over again next year. I've got a couple of housekeeping items for us before I turn things over. As I mentioned, the event's being live streamed. It's also being recorded, so you can view it again on the Vancouver Writers Fest YouTube channel. That will be available immediately, I believe. And I'd also like to ask you to mute your electronic devices. I always love watching people reach for their pockets at this point. Would love for those beeps and boops to not happen. If you do need to exit and re-enter the room during the event, we've got the back doors open and washrooms, if you haven't found them already, just outside these doors next to the staircase. We don't anticipate any issues today, but if there is a fire alarm or any other reason to evacuate, VPL staff will lead you to safety, and I'll just point to my colleagues standing at the back there and me, so those are your VPL staff for the evening. And I would like to now welcome to the stage Sarah Wong, Programming Coordinator for the Vancouver Writers Fest. Come on up, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Leah. Good evening, everyone. Oh, sorry. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Wong, and I am the Programming Coordinator at the Vancouver Writers Fest. We're very grateful to be able to live, work, and play on these unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Thank you for joining us here in person and the many joining us digitally for our final Incite of the season, where we celebrate the authors shortlisted in their respective categories for the BC and Yukon book prizes. So they are Iona Wishaw for A Lethal Lesson, Elaine Winslow Mystery, Henry Doyle for No Shelter, Cedar Bowers for Astra, Nicola I. Campbell's Spilechm, A Weaving of Recovery, Resilience, and Resurgence, and Karen Dufek and Queston for Where the Power Is. All 5 of these books are available for sale tonight over here, courtesy of Book Warehouse, and book signings will also be available over there after the show. So after the program, audience members will receive a survey for feedback for tonight's programming. We read each feedback and use your suggestions to make our events better. So from our received surveys, we will draw for a winner for some books later on as well. We want to take the moment to thank our Incite partners this evening, the Vancouver Public Library and TELUS, for their constant collaboration and support. We also thank our government sponsors, the Government of Canada, the Province of British Columbia, the Canada Council for the Arts, the VC Arts Council, the City of Vancouver, and CMHC Granville Island, all of whose support is pivotal to us bringing to our audiences free programs such as Incite. So not only is today a beautiful day, it is also the 1st of June, where we welcome both Pride Month and National Indigenous History Month. While decolonization, inclusion, and accessibility work happens every day, we hope to emphasize these writers and stories, especially during this month. There is absolutely no shortage of wonderful titles within the Vancouver Public Library, and we also encourage you to check out our past programming from the Vancouver Writers Fest, including podcasts and recorded events available on our website, writersfest.bc.ca, and also available on our YouTube. Although tonight is the finale for our Incite series, we return in late June with 2 exciting events. On June 25th, we present our digital summer book club featuring the new title from Robin Maynard and Leanne Simpson, Rehearsals for Living, a pivotal dialogue between 2 distinguished voices in Canadian literature on the intersecting crises of the pandemic, police killings, and climate catastrophe. This is moderated by celebrated poet Ionina Curtin. Academy Award nominee Sarah Polley joins us in person on June 28th to speak of her new book of personal essays, Run Towards the Danger, and what it is to inhabit a constant state of becoming, learning, and changing. All in an intimate conversation with the Vancouver Writers Fest's artistic director, Leslie Hurtig. Details on these events, along with other upcoming events, can be found on our website. And finally, to introduce our moderator, Megan Cole is a tattooed food enthusiast with an obsessive reading habit. She's the Director of Programming and Communications for the BC and Yukon Book Prizes. Part of the work she does for the book prizes includes hosting and producing Writing the Coast, a podcast featuring interviews with the finalists and winners of the BC and Yukon Book Prizes. When Megan isn't developing programming and podcast episodes, she is working on essays and her first creative nonfiction book, Nice Boys Don't Kiss Like That. Womanhood explored through 90s rom-coms, MSN Messenger, and First Loves. Megan's work has appeared in Chatelaine, The Puritan, This Magazine, Untethered Magazine, and more. And Megan lives and works on the territory of the Slayaman Nation. Please welcome Megan Cole. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. As Sarah mentioned, I'm visiting today from the territory of the Tla'amin Nation, which is Powell River, British Columbia. And it's been a really interesting time for us in Powell River as we talk about the history of our community, because we're looking at renaming the city. And so we've been in conversation with the Tla'amin Nation around what our future will look like going forward. So it's a really interesting story, and I think it's important for us to talk about the stories of the communities whose land we live on, and I'm grateful that we have these events to have those conversations. So thank you so much to the Vancouver Writers Fest and Vancouver Public Library for partnering with us on, this is our 3rd Incite event, the first one we've been able to do in person, and it's so lovely to be here with all of you. We kind of did a bit of rejigging for tonight's event, so we're going to have each of the authors join me on stage, and then the Q&A will actually be broken up individually for each author. So we will make time for your questions after their readings, so if you're at home or in person, feel free to ask those questions when the time comes. As you are thinking of your questions, please try to keep it to one focused question. It helps me say them again for the people at home. And also, as you're thinking of your questions, please let kindness and genuine curiosity guide you as you think of your questions. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our 5 wonderful authors and contributors, and we're going to start with Cedar Bowers. Cedar Bowers' fiction has been published in Joyland and Tattle Creek. Astra is her first novel. With her husband, novelist Michael Christie, and their 2 children, she divides her time between Galiano Island, where she grew up, and Victoria. Astra is a finalist for the 2022 Ethel Wilson Fiction Prize. Come on up. I feel like I'm part game show host, part moderator.
Will I win something? No, I'm just kidding. While I'm here.
Maybe.
No, I didn't mean like that. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody at the BC and Yukon Book Prizes and to the Vancouver Writers Festival and to the Vancouver Public Library. Vancouver is near and dear to my heart because I was born at St. Paul's just up the street and I lived here through all my 20s, so I'm very happy to be here today. Also, when I took the ferry over this morning, I realized that Astra came out exactly 1 year ago today, and everything that, that was pretty peak pandemic, so everything was online, so I'm really happy to speak to some people in real life. So thank you very much. Astra is my first novel. It is the story of one woman told over 60 years of her life through the eyes of 10 different people she encounters. So you hear from family members, family friends, exes, bosses, acquaintances, as they encounter her through their own stories. And through this structure, I hope the reader gets to form their own opinion of her. When I started writing the book, I was thinking of themes of self. Can you really know who you are if you don't know how you've affected people in your past? And can you truly say you know somebody, even those who are closest to you, if you don't know who they have affected, who they've harmed, and their histories? So those were sort of the themes I was exploring. My idea this evening is to read 2 very short pieces to give you a bit of a texture of jumping forward through time and meeting Astra at different points in her life. Another little thing about her is that she grows up in northern British Columbia on a farming commune where she's raised by her pretty neglectful and cosmically guided father. And so she has to leave and go forward into the world with kind of a paltry toolbox. So I'm going to start there at the beginning of the book and read a little bit from her father's perspective. This chapter's a little bit unique because Astra doesn't yet exist. She has not been born, but her presence looms very heavily in her father's mind. Raymond Brine doesn't want to think about the coming baby. He doesn't want to think about it or about Gloria or his role in it all. He doesn't want to think about a creature so mewling and helpless, not about its cord, its first cry, or its delicate newborn skin. He doesn't want to think about shared blood or family lines or humanity's relentless compulsion to overpopulate this weary planet either. What he wants to do is work, to toil away on celestial farms' lands with his comrades under this vast expanse of sky, to focus on soil, irrigation, crop yields, and building more housing for the commune. But this baby is coming as fast as a hurtling comet, and already it's made a mess of everything. Gloria arrived with the influx of spring workers in March, and after a long winter alone in his one-room fur cabin that he built his first winter at the farm, Raymond found himself drawn to her quick laugh and broad shoulders, so he let her spend a few nights in his bed. When it soon became clear that she was interested in more, he requested she move into the yurt with the others, carefully explaining that he didn't believe in monogamous relationships, that he treasured his independence, and that he never planned on being tied down. Gloria cited this as the reason she kept the pregnancy from him until June, and why she announced the news publicly during the morning breakfast meeting, rather than talking to him one-on-one. After the women finished their congratulations, running their fingers over her small, taut belly and kissing her full cheeks, Raymond pulled her aside to explain yet again that he wasn't that kind of man. Not the kind who got married or provided or believed that A and B led to C. He wasn't going to move to the city, cut his hair, get a job in a bank or some other bullshit like that. He wasn't going to buy a house or a stroller, because on and on it would go. He'd been called to Celestial for a reason, and nothing was going to distract him or slow him down. If Gloria was hoping he'd build a family with her, or that she'd get a declaration of love, she'd set her sights on the wrong man. So yes, of course, Astra moves off the farm eventually, but I'm going to read from the next section is also on Celestial Farm. One little bit about Celestial, it was mostly started by this one guy, Raymond, and a bunch of women who did a lot of the work. So we're going to hear from Clodagh 15 years after this. She had been on the farm when she was young, a late teenager in her early 20s, and then she leaves for many, many years and has children of her own. And she's just, when we see her in this chapter, she's just gone through a horrible breakup. She has nowhere to live and no job and some kids that are in tow. And so she drives back to Celestial with the hopes that she'll find some place that will welcome her again. She can return there, and she feels she has some stake to Celestial Farms. So we're going to hear from her when she first arrives. At the encampment, Clodagh pulls into a patch of sun-dappled shade under a silver birch, smoke wafting from the engine. She turns the van off and loosens her grip on the steering wheel as doubt wraps around her throat. Years back, there'd been much talk at Celestial of constructing a big, fantastical house for the commune workers. They'd start by building a river stone oven in the heart, one that they could use in the winter for central heat and all year round for bread baking. Then they'd build out in a circular pattern, room upon room, towers, nooks, dorms, bunks, all the woodwork original and intricate. In the evenings, when the workers gathered around the fire, Raymond sketched construction plans in the dirt with his boot heel while they sat rapt, watching, listening, believing, their irises tracking his every move. So she'd hoped to find Celestial still thriving this way. Instead, the encampment hasn't changed and appears nearly abandoned. There's no fireplace, no house, no community of like-minded people waiting to welcome them. Boxes of beer bottles and whiskey jugs are stacked by the dining table, and worn tires and garbage bags are heaped everywhere. Beside the flat black school bus, Raymond's little cabin stands in the shade, bursting with painful memories. And at the edge of the forest sits the yurt that Clodagh and Freedom had called home for 2 summers, although now the canvas is shredded and stained with continents of mold. "Is this it, Mama? Is this our new home?" Sativa asks, waking to her mother's quiet swearing. "I don't know," she manages to say, trying her best to sound unfazed. "Let's get out and see." 10 minutes pass before she hears someone coming up the path. Then there's the sound of Raymond whistling, crisp and clear, that same tune as always. "Well, would you look at that," he says, voice booming, once he breaks into the clearing, a young woman half hiding behind him. Raymond is still bearded and very skinny, loose linen pants tied around his hips, plaid shirt left unbuttoned, his torso bare. He pulls the girl into view and puts his hands on her shoulders. "Do you see what I see?" he asks, giving her a slight shake. "Is there a woman standing there, or is it my imagination?" "No, she's real," says the girl, who appears to be around 15. Her hair is waist-long, nearly black, and parted clean down the middle as if she'd copied the style from the back of a folk record. Clodagh's muscles tense. His daughter, of course, dark, tall, and thin, exactly like him. It's not that Clodagh had forgotten Astra. How could she? But for some reason, she'd blocked her out, assumed there's no way she'd be living here still, that at some point, some kind soul would have swooped in and taken her off Raymond's hands. Clodagh is unsure if she's pleased or horrified to see her again, all knees and bones and baggage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We do have some audience questions, you're welcome, that have come in online. Do we have any hands in front of me before I leap online? Not yet? Okay. So the question from our online attendee is, as this is your debut novel, can you please talk about your process? What are some of the things you've learned through the process that you'll take into your future writing? Do you feel like the writing process gets easier after the first book?
I don't think I knew what process was when I started Astra at all. I started probably 9 years ago, and I just wanted to write a novel sort of for myself. I didn't really care if it ever left my desk drawer. But part of the structure that I picked, I hoped would be educational for myself, that I could kind of learn how to write in different people's voices and from different perspectives and different ages. So the structure kind of lent to learning, I think. But it took so long to write that I think I just did it bit by bit. And now I'm feeling like I know nothing as I try to write another book. So I don't think this is a very encouraging answer, but I think I learned a lot and learned nothing at all.
It's an honest answer. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cedar. Is there any other audience questions before I invite Nicola on stage? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Our next reader is Nicola I. Campbell. Nicola is the author of Shishieko, Shinshin's Canoe, Grandpa's Girls, and A Day with Yaya. Inkla Patma, Celix, and Métis from British Columbia, her stories weave cultural and land-based teachings that focus on respect, endurance, healing, and reciprocity. Nicola's books have been among the finalists for numerous children's literary awards. Shinshi's Canoe won the 2008 TD Canadian Children's Literature Award, and she was a 2009 Governor General's Award for Illustration finalist. Shipelechem is a finalist for the 2022 Jim Diva Prize for Writing That Provokes. Welcome, Nicola.
Kunlo, thank you for having me here today on the traditional territories of the Skohotmish, Kumathquiam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, Coast Salish peoples. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Will you read something for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is my 6th book, Spielechem, in the Intlekapmach language, actually means are remembered stories told and orated about things that have taken place. This was actually my master's thesis for the MFA program at UBC, and it just kind of happened by accident. I had all this work and was trying to write a fiction novel. And my aunt had given me a collection of letters that my mom had written prior to my dad's passing. And in that process, I actually decided to compile all my work chronologically. And what unfolded with my thesis advisor, he actually said that this was my thesis, that it was already written, and he also told me that there would not be any publishers. It would be very difficult to find a publisher who would publish a multidisciplinary book. And he told me not to give up. And so, and it was a long process, and I'm grateful that I stood by and stayed with it. So this is, I'll start with the poem I wrote after receiving the letters. July 26, 1973. They are on a hillside, baby on a blanket, 9 months old. 1,000 people, Saskatchewan River. This is Batoche. July 26, 1973. She calls when she sees two children, bobbing like buoys, swift currents unyielding. John, those children are drowning. Daddy brought the children to shore, but he did not bring himself. The river would not set him free. Activist, revolutionary, woodland Cree, Scottish, French, Michif, fiddles, Red River jig. The Saskatchewan River flowed through his veins. Johnny Campbell was my daddy. He was Métis. And immediately following that, I started thinking about my mother as somebody from the Nicola Valley. And as an Indigenous writer, one of the things that I tend to do is write from the place where I originate, where my blood comes from, where my ancestors come from. And so that is, I wrote this next poem, Swells of Tzitletko, cold, cold water, joining, transforming, reforming, rivers like sisters, singing clear and cold. Shinkiep sings through the valley, across mountains to the prairies. She's a Shuta, that one. Her blood is from Shptitch, the place where fresh water flows up from underground. Ntlagapmach, Silch, Stwachmach. Sagebrush and fir boughs, juniper and wild roses weave through her veins. And then there was a poem that I wrote in the years following, when actually this was in the process of getting it published. This came out, and it was as I was learning about the translation for Timuch, and as a interior Salish person and as a Salish person from British Columbia, one of the elements of our languages is there are many root words that are similar between Coast Salish and Interior Salish. And the other element is that what Timuch means is this interweaving of all living things. It's not a flat, like the concept of land. It's not just land. It is a really dynamic translation. And I think for people who speak other languages, especially Indigenous languages, you might have an understanding of how dynamic translations can be. So this is Timuch. Timuch, Tumuch, Tum Hulach, our sacred land, our sacred land, our sacred land. When the colonizers arrived, they stole everything beautiful. Our children, our languages, our land, our water. Songs, stories, ancestral memories, desecrated sacred ceremonies, presented gifts of dis-ease, addiction, shame, destroyed and prohibited all things woven of the land, harvests of medicinal and berry plants, roots, tea, blankets, regalia, baskets, carvings, stole our food, replaced it with flour, sugar, alcohol, contaminated traders' blankets, carrying smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis. Now we put the blankets of hurt away, rip apart rotten, diseased strands, tattered, torn from years of decay, strip away strands of embodied trauma, decrepit, racist, colonial hate. Put it in the fire, bury it in a box, bring it to the water, return to sacred ancestral memories. Grandmother, sister, daughter, grandfather, brother, son. Resurgence awakens the healing energy within. The weavers return when the trees awaken from a deep winter sleep, activated by the flow of sap in spring. When the weavers arrive, the trees are singing, roots, trunk, branches sway all the way to the sky. Remembered gentle spirits, reverent touch of those harvesting, reciprocating love, gathering, washing, spinning, twining, warping vital strands, wool, cedar, spruce, bark, roots, pine needles, Indian hemp, sweetgrass, tum hulach, tumuch, tumuch, weave ourselves back together, all that is sacred, hearts, spirits, minds, bodies, earth, wind, sky, water, life force, spirit, languages. We are the land where our languages emerge. We are here. We have always been here. Ntlagapmachjin, nsilchjin, sequapmachjin, slatliam tats, hulkameetnam, hulkamelam, hunkameetnam, tlail watuts, kohotmish sneecham, humathquiam, kawatsan, tlatmin, at jutham, senkoten, shashashi, shashlam, tilkoten, zakani, tuchoni, watash, dakash, itzanim, witzuaten, nduten, nishka, shkuich, smalkiach, haida kil, ha isla kala, kwakwakawak, katanacha, dititik, nu halkmuk, wikinuch, nu chatnuch, helpsik, taltan, schlinge, deneza, denezage, weave ourselves back together, sacred strands of light and dark, woven fibers, filaments of motherhood, fatherhood, birthing, raising empowered children, compassion, forgiveness, safety, fundamentals of culture, family, truth, peace, joyful play, laughter, self-discipline, and love. Sacred rememberers, orators, educators, ancestral narratives, pedagogies for traditional education, cultural and spiritual practices, matriarchs and warriors, communities, families, children. The soil of British Columbia, pit house people, river people, village people, lawn house people, ocean people, big house people, the original humans of this land, tum hulach, tumuch, timuch, embedded, intertwined. The land we are, woven together like strands of light. The land remembers. Is that 10 minutes? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicola. We have a question from our online audience. June is the National Indigenous History Month. Oral storytelling is how Indigenous wisdom has been passed from one generation to the next. You mentioned that your stories that the stories in your book were often shared over tea in quiet hours between elders. How does oral storytelling build community between elders and members of the community, and how did it shape this book?
It's interesting. The question kind of answers itself. I think the whole practice of oratory and narrative traditions of Indigenous people is about community, and it is about remembering, and it is about sustaining our cultural ideologies and our teachings, and about teaching our children to remember who we are and where we come from. And even with this poem, one of the things that I wanted to do I was reflecting on how in school, in elementary and public school, high school, I never once heard the names of our nations here in British Columbia, and especially heard that our languages, the names of our languages as spoken by our own people. And so with this poem, I wanted to really try to list as many of those as I possibly could, because I wanted people to hear those names. I wanted people to hear those languages and know that they are alive, and they're alive inside of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have one more question for you. I find it very interesting that the word weaving is used in your title. Is the act of storytelling inherently collective, so that there can never be one thread, but a constant collaborative work of many threads of storytellers, inspirations, characters, etc.? How can this work with colonial ideas of a single narrative, a single storyteller or recorder, a single truth?
What was the joining between those two thoughts?
The joining between two thoughts.
There,
So that there can never be one thread, but a constant collaborative work of many threads of storytellers, inspirations, characters.
so are they asking what the difference is, or what are they asking?
It's kind of three questions in one.
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe you want to just focus on the last part of the question.
Okay.
How can this work with colonial ideas of a single narrative, a single storyteller or recorder, and a single truth?
How can this work? So how can the work work? Okay. It doesn't work as a single narrative. So and I don't think it would have, and I don't think as an Indigenous writer I'm capable of, it's really hard to do that. I find that I'm always struggling and I think that was a big part of it growing up, and writing, and coming as a child, being raised by elders who were multilingual, going into an English classroom where the English language has always been an oppressive force on our people, and in my elders and my community, being able to find a place and a space for my voice, and I think was a huge process in just seeing the journey through in publishing this as a multidisciplinary work. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Part of the question, at least. Thank you so much, Nicola. It was a beautiful reading. All right. Our third author this evening is Henry Doyle. Henry lives and works in Vancouver's downtown east side. A longtime member of Thursday Writing Collective and the Downtown East Side Writing Collective, Henry has published work in Poetry is Dead, Megaphone, Geist, and the anthologies V68, Writing from Vancouver's Downtown East Side, and From the Heart of It All, 10 years of writing from Vancouver's downtown east side. He won Geist Magazine's DTS Jamboree Writing Contest in 2011 and the Muriel Journey Poetry Prize in 2020. No Shelter is a finalist for the 2022 Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize. Welcome, Henry. Can I pour you a glass of water?
Oh, no,
Okay.
I think I'm good. Okay, can you hear me there? Hi, I'd like to thank Anvil Press, Brian Kaufman, and also this book wouldn't be possible without the guidance. A huge thanks to my mentor, Finoa Lam. So let's just read some poetry, right? Okay. I'm going to read No Shelter. That's the name of the book. I took a job at Maine Hastings at the city washrooms. And thank God I brought my journal, because I was doing journaling since I was a kid in jail and stuff like that and on the streets. And so I took a journal and I wrote about the people coming down those 18 steps to the city washrooms. And this is a couple of poems about these, about the people that I met there, okay? This poem is called No Shelter. I should have worn my glasses. Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, maybe. I don't know, man. Okay. Oh, yeah. They work. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, No Shelter. One morning at work, I hear an old man crying. As I walk over to the last stall, I smell, the smell of feces grows stronger. Everything okay in there, buddy? I ask. The stall door is partly open. The man inside has wavy gray hair and wears an oversized tweed jacket. Ashamed and confused at the same time, he's naked from the waist down. His bright green eyes stare at his soiled pants on the floor. His hands spread apart in surrender. I had to sleep on the streets last night. No room at the shelter. I had a bad accident in my pants, he says in an elegant, intelligent voice. What do you need? I'm the janitor here. Size 32 pants, underwear, socks. But first he has to clean himself up. I run to the paper towel dispenser, wet a stack, and return to the stall. Here, take this. Don't worry about the mess, I say. Then I run up to the First United Church to get him underwear and pants, but they don't have any socks. To give the man time, I stop at the bar for a quick beer. Should have done that. 4 or 5 swigs later, I'm off. Back to the washroom. He's still in the stall. Okay. I give him the clothes, peel off my winter socks, and hand them to him. I won't ever see the man again, but I hope he's okay. Okay. Yeah, we got a lot of characters in the downtown east side. It's getting pretty heavy down there lately. This one's called Volcano Boy. One of the regulars comes down those steps, holding a skateboard and a handful of syringes. He's skinny like a stack of celery with arms, reminding me of myself at that age. He heads for the last stall. After 15 minutes, I walk down the range. "Everything okay in there, kid?" I ask. He looks up at me, his moon face pocketed with pimples. "Do you have any Band-Aids, boss?" he asks politely. He's sitting there on the toilet seat and digging into his scabby holes in his left forearm. They look like small forces of volcanoes with rivers of blood. Holy shit, I'll be right back. I run to the office, put on fresh gloves, grab the first aid kit, run back, open up a handful of alcohol prep pads so he can clean his arm up. Then gently, one at a time, I put on a Band-Aid over each little volcano. That's, thank you. The reason that guy was had all those, they were really like half-inch thick or quarter-inch thick. That's because he was shooting up jib right into his arms and missing the vein or whatever. That's what it was explained to me anyways. I got time for another one or two, eh? Okay, so I'll read you this one. It's called Down and Out in Ottawa. Ottawa is my bad luck city. Haven't been there in 10 years. No wonder the clutch blew out in my old Triumph. The Sally Ann lets me park it at the back of the building. I stay for 18 months in the basement dormitory while my bike gets rebuilt. A ripple in my life. $6 a night for a bed, $42 a week, meals not included. Church mandatory on Sundays. 20 cots with gray army-style bedding. Beside them, metal chairs with tin can ashtrays. Every couple of feet, a sign on the wall. Attention. If you smoke in bed, make sure you have 1 foot on the floor at all times. On worn wooden pews, old wino war vets with their potato faces, mushroom noses, and alcavelva breath keep me company. Time hangs off their melting skin as they doze. I'm wide awake, my nerves digging their way out of me. I leave after the morning service. My unwashed hair hangs down past my shoulders. Tattered blue jeans stuck inside my cowboy boots. Holes in the soles stuffed with cardboard. Heels worn down on wooden and nails. Grinding on the sidewalk. I wander around lost in my own hometown. I got time for one more, maybe? Yeah.
I've got quite a few questions coming in, Henry, for you. So why don't we? Do you have a short one for us, or?
Sure, I got a short
Okay.
one. I always got a short one. How about Sunday morning sidewalk or something like that? I'm not going to read that one. Jesus Christ. Okay, no. Okay, refugees from nowhere. I stand in a long line waiting for the city shelter doors to open down on Cordova Street. A cop van pulls up and they start handing out new sleeping bags like we are refugees from nowhere. We're each given a mat on the gym floor, a pillow, and a gray blanket. I asked for a wake-up call for 5 a.m. My brand new construction boots tied together and hung around my neck. I come back from the toilet in the middle of the night, step into the low-lit, and notice, we all look like plane crash victims in zipper bags. Okay.
All right. I feel like I need to ask this question because you're wearing your Team Bukowski shirt. You
Oh, yeah.
created a poetry video for the poem Drunken Laundry Day with Charles Bukowski. What was the process like of translating that written poem into an animated video?
Oh, that wasn't easy. It took a lot of work, and we had a lot of people helping us. We had to. It was like writing a script for a movie almost. So we had to write stuff out, and the illustrators, the illustrator was really great. She caught my walk perfectly, and it took a lot of work, and it went all over the place, and did I answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
I have one more for you. There are so many changes happening to neighborhoods in this city. Would you consider your poetry a memorial to the city and its people?
Yeah, I think I would. I'm still writing about the city, and I'm still writing. It's really cool. It is sort of like a memorial. The Winter Hotel burnt down. They found 2 or 3 bodies in the rubber and the rubble. There was dogs and cats and stuff like that were missing. I'm trying to write about that, and so yeah, I keep a watch on the downtown east side and the newspapers, and I try to write about it, and I guess instead of being in the newspaper, I write poetry about it to keep people informed about stuff what goes on down there, you know.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Okay.
for your reading.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I introduce our next readers, I just want to remind everyone at home and in the audience, we won't be doing a Q&A at the end of the event. So if you do have questions for the authors as they're on stage, make sure you lift a hand. I'm sorry, I've been ignoring the audience questions. I'm so used to doing virtual events. This is a bit odd. But yes, feel free to wave wildly at me if I don't see you, and we'll try and get to all your questions. So for our next authors, I have the pleasure of introducing 2 lovely people, Karen Duffick and Quest Queston. Karen Duffick is the curator of contemporary visual arts and Pacific Northwest at the MOA. Committed to supporting the activation of Northwest Coast Indigenous collections inside and outside the museum, her research, exhibitions, and publications focus on the relationships between historical and contemporary art practices, museum collections, communities, and art markets. And with Karen is Quest Queston. Quest Queston has served his Musqueam community in multiple ways, including holding roles as a speaker, a council member, a protocol officer, and an elders representative. In addition, he has worked as a sculptor, carver, laborer, and archaeologist. Welcome, Karen and Quest Queston.
Kind of show. We'll stand up here. I'm really grateful to be part of this today and to be able to show our book, Where the Power Is, Indigenous Perspectives on Northwest Coast Art, and to be accompanied by Queston, one of the contributors to the book. I'm also grateful to be reminded in this event how wonderful it is to be surrounded by the spoken word. We're focusing on the written, but it's so great to actually hear the stories. I'm going to read a little bit from the section that myself and my co-author, Jordan Wilson, wrote together. And so I'll read a few excerpts from that to introduce the project, and then we'll be followed by Questin reading some of his contributions. Where the Power Is features the diverse voices and perspectives of 81 Indigenous artists, activists, thinkers, and knowledge holders from the Pacific Northwest. They engaged in dialogue with the three authors, the late Bill McLennan, who was a much respected and long-time curator at the Museum of Anthropology, Jordan Wilson, a member of the Musqueam First Nation and a young scholar and curator who is in the UK right now, and that's why he's not here with me today, and myself, curator at MOA. Together, we asked how contemporary First Nations individuals, descendants from the object's originating communities, respond to and connect with a wide range of historical Northwest Coast cultural belongings at the site of the museum. It's an emergency, right? The Tsimshian performance artist Skeena Reese asks in the book, emphasizing the need to foreground Indigenous knowledge about the ancestral pieces in the museum, and to once again center them within Indigenous community and ways of knowing. This book is about that process. First Nations artists and researchers working with collections and museums today are making it clear that they require a relationship with their ancestral materials, and by implication, a new relationship with the institutions themselves. They're responding to the reality that Northwest Coast Indigenous works from the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries only rarely remain in contemporary Indigenous communities. Though much new regalia is being made and used and new poles raised in ceremony, it has become normalized that most historical Indigenous artifacts are held in museum and private collections, locally and around the world. No matter how far the material objects have traveled, though, each piece anchors intangible knowledge to real places of origin and to real people, both past and present. We invite readers to see the extraordinary objects and belongings featured in this book through the perspectives of Indigenous artists, scholars, and knowledge holders. The commentators relate them to new concerns in ways unanticipated, not only by their makers and previous Indigenous owners, but also by those who collected the pieces for their own interests. This is the unforeseen potential that Haida artist Raymond Boisjoli speaks about as he considers what historical Indigenous artworks once were, what they are now, and what they may yet become. The hundreds of thoughtful and purposeful commentaries assembled in this book create a context of collective viewing, providing an opportunity for listening and reflection. The participants are unequivocal in their engagement with the objects at hand. Their acts of holding, studying, and sometimes embracing the ancestral works with authority are significant. These encounters are taking place at the site of the museum, an institution that on the one hand is a place of displacement, and on the other, a place of connection and repair. It's a site where objects and belongings bring people together, each object a potential catalyst to change the communities it functions within. Its return into a network of relations includes but expands beyond the museum audiences that for too long represented the inevitable conclusion of the object's story. I'll pass it to you, Questin.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. I'd like to give you a little context for my reading. I think it's essential. We at Musqueam believe we're reincarnated. That's how we travel through time. Our oral histories are our memories of our past lives. Our earliest memories come from a time before what we call the winter without end, which you would know as the Wisconsin glaciation. When I was a child, my parents took me into the mountains. We paddled through a lake, through a river, through another lake, through another river, into a very deep, cold, pure lake. We camped on a sandy beach. In the morning, my mother got us up before the sun was up. She took me to the beach. She said, "Son, you understand that that lake is a living thing?" "Yes, Mother." She reached into the water and took out a handful of water. And she said, "You understand that now this water is a separate life from the lake?" I said, "Yes, Mother." She threw her hands in the air, and all the little sparkling drops fell to earth. And she said, "You understand that all these drops are their own living entity?" "Yes, Mother." That is a lesson from our oral history, from our memories, from that time before the winter without end. It's a lesson that says the world is in a state of continuous transition. It's a lesson that says everything is a living thing. So I wanted to share that with you so that what I read to you makes sense. The first reading I'm going to share with you is about a stone bowl. Karen invited me out to the museum. I didn't know what she had. I had admired this bowl since I was a child. It's a human face. It's quite substantial. It's about 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, made out of basalt. It would have taken a long time to make. So now I'll start reading. When I saw this piece in the museum, my first thought was, he's up to something. He's out. He's one of those things that's maybe trapped here and has something to do. And he's got into somebody's head, and they found a reason to bring him out, and they think it's their own idea. It never occurs to them that it's a statement from the piece itself. I can see why people today are fascinated by him. That enigmatic smile, that steady gaze. He's got a plan. Whoever created him didn't create the plan for him. They freed the rock in its rebirth to become that person there. His journey is not over. When we are long forgotten, people are going to be talking about him. He's going somewhere, and he's carrying the values he has always had. The people who interact with him in the future will learn not how to recreate the past, but how to manifest their perception of his value in their society. That's what gives him meaning to us now, because we'll never know his past, not the way we want to. To me, the larger ideas that come to mind when I see my community's objects in a museum are ancestral snu'ayas, our inherited teachings. One of the oldest such laws is that all things are in a continuous state of transition. That's my first interest when I see an object in a museum. I ask myself, where is this piece in its journey? Where is it going? With this first thought, I don't try to see into the past of something. I try to see into its future. It's true that objects in the museum are old and their origin is in the past, but they're alive. When I see an object in the museum, I see a traveler on a journey. This stone bowl lives here now. He's not in the past. He's not a relic. He's here right now. He has a mission to do in the future. He'll be working long after we're gone. So that was a very beautiful bowl, but my adventure with Karen started when she asked me in to come and look at a paddle that was on loan to the museum. It had been collected more than 200 years ago over by Cowichan. Questqueston, my name, comes from Quamachin, just a few miles from what you know as Cowichan. I probably have a familial connection to this artifact. In our language, we call the maple tree the paddle tree, the broadleaf maple. We use it to make paddles. This paddle, when I carved a replica of this, when I was carving the blade, it was so thin it would flex under the knife. The wood stores the energy before it releases it in your paddle stroke. It has an exquisite shape. Around the handle where your top hand holds it, whoever created this carved little feather icons. In our culture, when we want to calm the waters, we spread feathers on the water so that whoever holds this paddle has a visual image of spreading the feathers on the water to calm the waves. So I want to read you what's in the book about this paddle. This is an amazing old paddle. It's so different from the majority of contemporary Salish paddles that are used at canoe races today. The decisions that the artist made creating this piece 200 and some years ago illustrate what his priorities were and how they're different from a modern paddle carver's ideas and techniques. Wonderful, inspirational, but it doesn't represent only the past. In Musqueam culture, all living things can have attributes that are best translated into English as a personality. To me, this personality is a primary characteristic that defines the meaning of an object, and an object's personality is not an arbitrary collage of attributes that are assigned to a lifeless thing. It comes from its soul. An object's personality comes to me to the degree that the object wants to communicate with me. That applies to objects in the museum as well. When I first saw this paddle, I immediately thought of the soul canoe. Musqueam people believe that the soul travels through eternity in a metaphorical canoe, and the teachings and knowledge that you gain in life are paddles for that journey. Our ancestors knew that the world is in a continuous state of transition, and they sought knowledge that would bring balance into each phase of life and each incarnation of the soul. So thank you.
Before I let you leave the stage, we do have a question. I think it might be more for Karen, but this book looks at the objects through a contemporary lens. The pieces are informed by working knowledge of the cultures. What was the process like curating the objects for the book?
It was kind of a mixed process. That's a good question because the objects are so much at the center as what everybody was responding to. We had worked with so many of the people in this book already over the years, and we knew what were kind of the favorite pieces and the pieces of great interest to the artists and scholars who came to visit. And so that guided our selection in part. We wanted to be really representative of the entire coast. We wanted to represent something of the interior. We wanted to really make sure that women's work was getting its fair share of attention, which often doesn't happen in books about Northwest Coast historical art. So there were various criteria. We had relationships with so many interesting folks whose voices we knew would create some of that diversity that we were really looking for in this book and in relation to these historical collections.
Thank you. I forgot to mention in my bio that Where the Power is a finalist for the 2022 Roderick Haig Brown Regional Prize. Thank you so much again to the two of you. All right. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Iona Wishaw. Iona is a former educator and social worker whose mother and grandfather were both spies during their respective wars. She is the award-winning author of the Globe and Mail best-selling Wayne Winslow mystery series. She lives here in Vancouver with her husband, and Lethal Lesson is a finalist for the 2022 Bill Duthie Booksellers' Choice Award.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This may be the finalist for the Bill Duthie Award. However, through perhaps a fortuitous problem, all the books that are there for sale are in fact my latest book. So, because June 1st is the beginning of Indigenous sort of culture activities and celebration, that book does, my characters are Lane Winslow, who comes here from England. This is right after the war. And, you know, she's got a bit of PTSD. She's been doing some intelligence, and she just wants to get away. So she fetches up by Kootenay Lake in a tiny little community. And she eventually gets together with the local Nelson police inspector and helps him out with various cases. And in fact, according to him, creates them because she keeps finding bodies. And the book that is over there for sale actually came about because I met a wonderful woman who is an anthropologist who worked on a book about the Sinixt Lakes People Reburial Project in the Valakan in the Kootenay Lake area. And through her, I was able to meet the wonderful elder Marilyn James, who is, her title is the mother of the autonomous Sinixt. And she really fell in with the project quite enthusiastically because what I said I wanted was for Lane Winslow, my character, a settler who saw those posters that were mentioned by the first speaker, you know, land for the taking and so on. And I wanted them to meet and to understand who the people were who were there before. So that's what's in that book over there. So I hope you enjoy that. But I will read from this one. This book is, I tend to fixate a little bit on sort of historical themes. Sometimes there's spying themes with a lot of Russians in them because there were a lot of Russians here after the war who were primarily trying to get nuclear secrets. So there were a number of spying activities going on here. But this book centers on the one-room schoolhouse, which I think especially for older Canadians, me, and other people my age and older, this was a really significant thing in the education of people who grew up in really small communities across the country. And there was a one-room schoolhouse in this community that I write about, Kings Cove, which is the fictional name of Queens Bay. I don't know why I could have just left it. But anyway, everybody knows. Everybody who lives there goes, come on, it's Queens Bay. We know it is. And my brother actually went to that school and had some really nice memories. So in this particular book, the school teachers have gone missing, and we learn a bit about all the different ways that the characters come together around the mystery that's central to this book, which is really the missing school teachers and the death of the father of one of the children. But I'm going to read about one of the school teachers because I go back into the history of each of these women. Very often they were women who moved into these communities to teach. And sometimes they were very well supported by the communities, and sometimes people really tried to take advantage of them, especially young men, women alone, blah, blah, blah. So I did want to look a little bit at who these women were that are missing right at the beginning of the book. So this is May 1939, and Wendy is one of those teachers, but here she is much, much younger. She's 16 in this. May 1939. Wendy looked up from the table. Oh, I should tell you that Wendy's mother has disappeared, and her father is completely incapable of looking after her. So he's brought her to the interior to live with his very, very religious brother, who runs a very tight ship. The kids are not allowed off the property, and the women marry young, and so on and so forth. There have been communities like that, I'm sure you know, in the interior of BC. Wendy looked up from the table where Verna sewed and Isaiah read. She looks after the two little children in this family. She heard the screen door open and her father's voice pitched respectfully, a circumstance so unusual that she felt a flutter of anxiety. The very fact that her father was there at all suddenly seemed ominous to her. Elder Nathaniel, she heard, alongside the clang of the coffee pot on the stove and the smell of the cake her aunt took out of the oven and spread raspberry jam on while it was still warm. She heard her aunt murmur something, and then chairs scraping. From where she was, she could see down the hall to one end of the table in the kitchen where her uncle sat. "Have you finished that passage? Are you ready to read it out loud to me?" Wendy said, turning back to Isaiah. She wasn't sure why she elected to use the Bible for today's readings rather than the books hidden on a shelf behind the bed. There had been a sense of expectation in the house, as if someone important was coming. That often meant an elder, best be caught with the Bible. The little boy put his finger on the line and began, whosoever believeth, stumbled over believeth, in me should not perish, supplied Wendy, glancing again toward the kitchen. Her aunt came around the table with the milk jug. Just at that moment, stopped and looked down the hall toward the children's bedroom. She apparently had not expected to see Wendy looking along the passage at her, and she turned abruptly and moved away from the door. The swiftness of her aunt's turning away from her made Wendy's heart leap into her throat. Something wasn't right. Her aunt looked guilty. It took all her effort to turn back to Isaiah and try to listen to his question. "What does perish mean?" "It means to die," Wendy said. She could feel her voice shaking, and she cleared her throat. "Then we won't die," he said, with all the satisfaction of a 7-year-old. "My rabbit died," Verna said, looking up from the handkerchief she was trimming. "He didn't believe in Jesus Christ," her brother said, a little contemptuously. Wendy toyed with the idea of explaining that everything dies, no matter what it believes in, and then, because she loved them, simply patted Verna on the head gently. "Let's go outside," she said, impelled by a sudden feeling of claustrophobia in the dimly lit room. "We can see if any new flowers came up on the edge of the field." Only too happy to go out, the children put on pullovers and together made for the mudroom to get boots. Wendy did not look toward the kitchen and closed the interior mudroom door so she would not have to hear the low voices murmuring over coffee and cake. And she, of course, is about to be married to an already married, much, much older man, because his wife is too old to really care for the house anymore, and his idea is that he will marry this young girl of 16 and bring her into his family.
Thank you. We have a question for you. This attendee is asking, "I am drawn to your writing mainly because the dialogue seems to be pulled right out of the movies from the 1940s and 1950s. Simple question. Are you a fan of those movies and the delightful repartee in them? Thanks very much."
I am. How perspicacious of the questioner, and of contemporary books of the period. I don't think I'm giving away too much to people who have read my books. Lane Winslow and the inspector do eventually marry, And much of how they speak with each other actually comes from my own mother and father. Lane Winslow is inspired by my mother to some extent. She's not as nutty as my mother was, but so a lot of that, they're both English, both my parents are English, so a lot of that comes from there. And it's tricky, it's actually more tricky than you would imagine. Sorry, I can't see a thing with my glasses on. I'm the opposite of you. The tricky thing about the language is that contemporary use of language is so ubiquitous and so much inside us that we don't often recognize it. And luckily, I have a first reader of the book who's even older than I am, and she is very quick to spot, quite modern usages, and she whips them away with a red pencil and says, no, I never heard this till the 2000s. So that's very helpful, because I think being able to use language not only in the narration, but in the dialogue that is more contemporaneous to the time does give the book more of a 1940s kind of feel. And there's a wonderful program, if anybody here is writing historical fiction at all, called Ngram. I don't know if you know of it, NGRAM, and you just Google it up and you can X out what's on there and put in up to 4 words of an expression you'd like to use, and it will tell you when it first came into literature. Exactly. And so many times I've put something in and it's like, oh no, that didn't come in until the 1980s. Wow. So it's been a great help.
I don't write historical fiction, but I'm just going to do that for fun now.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great.
Well, thank you so much, Iona. It was a great reading.
Thank you very much.
And let's give one more round of applause for all of our readers this evening. It was such a wonderful event. And now I'm going to invite Leah from the Vancouver Public Library back up.
Just wanted to pop up, and as our writers are moving over to the book signing table, I thought I would tell you about an upcoming event. So I'll invite all of you to head over, and the Writers Fest folks will help you get settled over at the signing table. On Saturday, June 11th at 2:30 p.m. here in the same room, we'll be hosting Writing the City, which is the award ceremony for the Vancouver Poet Laureate City Poems Contest. So writers of all ages have entered the City Poems Contest, which has been facilitated by the City of Vancouver's current Poet Laureate, Fiona Tinway-Lam, who, if you're here in person tonight, you have the distinct pleasure of meeting Fiona and chatting with her. So the writers who've entered the contest have found their inspiration in Vancouver's local neighborhoods, parks, gardens, beaches, bridges, creeks, streets, historic buildings, and more. So on the 11th, we'll be announcing the winners of this contest, and we'll also get to hear the winners read their poems. So I'd love for you to join us for that. More information can be found, of course, by chatting with Fiona or one of our VPL staff here tonight, or here at the info table. And we've also got some information about our other in-person and virtual events in the next little while. So it looks like folks are ready over here. Please get your wallets out, buy some books, and join us over here at the signing table. And thank you again for being here tonight.